everyone, welcome back to Strawberry Labs, and today we'll be looking at how we can integrate Prisma with a Next.js application. Prisma is an object relational mapper, which is a software that maps database operations to code. What this means is that stuff like creating tables, running queries, all of that has a particular syntax in the language that you're working with, and you can use that same language, for example TypeScript in our case, to create tables, run queries, alter database tables, and so on. The benefits of this is that it makes it easier to maintain a large database and it is harder to make mistakes with it. So what is Prisma? Prisma is an ORM for TypeScript. It consists of three main parts: the Prisma schema, which is the database schema that you write in TypeScript; Prisma Client, which is the query builder that is generated from the schema; and Prisma Migrate, which is a migration utility. What exactly is migration? Migrations are basically version control for databases. They help us keep track of database changes over the course of development. It is very similar to Git, where you start with an initial database configuration, and as you keep developing the application and make changes to the database, you commit these changes in the migration system. It makes it easier to roll back from mistakes, and the database is way more maintainable. And finally, the best benefit of this is that it makes it easier to replicate the database across different environments. So Prisma is not only an ORM, but it also provides a migration utility for us. So how do these components exactly work together? With Prisma schema, you get to generate a Prisma. You write Prisma code to generate a database. With Prisma Migrate, you make these changes that you have defined in the Prisma schema and apply it into the database. And Prisma Client is generated from both of these, and it provides you an interface from which you can build queries. We'll be looking at it directly in the code base. Firstly, we must set up a PostgreSQL container for us to work with. First, you should make sure that you have Docker installed in your system, and then you can run the following command to set up a Postgres instance. This option binds the port of the container to the port of the system. This option gives your container a name. This sets up a database password, and this detaches it from the current terminal, so you can close the terminal and the container will not stop running. Once you run this, your Docker container will be running, and you can connect with it inside pgadmin or dbeaver to analyze the database, run anything you want, and just keep track of the changes. Now let us take a look at the code. Firstly, you should be able to create an Next.js application, which you can find from their documentation. And once you make a Next.js application, make sure that you enable TypeScript and you use the app router. After that, you can look at Prisma's quick start and follow these instructions. This installs Prisma in your project, and this will initialize the Prisma ORM. That command will create this file and these two sections of code. After that, you can take this schema and paste it in the same file. After that, you can use the migration utility to create an initial migration. This is a command that you run on your development environment, and this is the name of that migration. As you make more migrations, they'll have different names depending on the change you make. And once you run that command, you'll notice that inside your database you have two new tables present. After that, we can use the 3 queries that they have given and create Next.js APIs for it. After you create a migration, you'll also notice that there's a folder here with the actual SQL query for the creation of tables. Make sure that in the environment file you have the appropriate database URL that connects to the correct database. There's the username, the password, the host, the port, and the database name itself. So to get started with the actual code, what you can do is you can write this code in lib, create a lib folder inside src, and you can create a prisma.ts file, and you can write this code, which will basically ensure that there is a singular Prisma client for the entire application. A Prisma client is equivalent to a connection to the database, and you don't want to create multiple Prisma clients for each API call. You don't want to overload the database with a large number of connections. After that, you can create an API folder and create these 3 endpoints for each of the 3 examples that are present in the quick start. You can modify those examples so that they come under Next.js API. So you can take the main function and keep it as it is, and you can call that main function inside a post function and return a Next.js response. It's exactly the same for creating a user, getting a user, and creating a user with posts. I have already started the API and we can see it work in action. As you can see, a user was created. We can take a look directly within the database as well. You can see that there is Alice in here, and there are no posts within the post database. Remember that within the API itself, we are hard coding the user values, so running this will not work. It will give an error because the email is supposed to be unique according to the schema. As you can see, the email is supposed to be unique, and because Alice doesn't have a unique email, the second time when we try to insert her data, we get an error. Next, let us create a user with posts, and you can see that it was successful. We can look at it directly in the database itself. There are 2 posts and there are 2 users. Finally, let us get all the users, and you can see that we get all the users. One thing that you'll notice is that Prisma handles the joins for us. We don't have to explicitly write an SQL join statement or think about the logic or worry about the logic. Prisma will directly handle it for us and parse the data accordingly. Now let us take a closer look at the schema itself. You will find that it is very intuitive and very similar to SQL in some ways. You can define an ID, the data type, and you can specify particular attributes for them. Like this is the primary key, and this has a default value. And if you're familiar with PostgreSQL, you'll know what auto increment is. This will automatically assign a value and keep incrementing the ID for each user that is entered into the database. Here you can see that there is an email which is unique string. This question mark here is basically an optional attribute. This column is optional. When you enter a user into the database, they can have a name or they cannot have a name. It doesn't care. Whereas email has to be present. This will be new to you. If you're coming from, if you're new to Prisma, this is the way Prisma handles foreign keys and relations. If you think about it, a user can have multiple posts, and that is defined as an array of posts. Post is another model that we create. And over here you can see that there is an author which is of type user, only one single user, and we define the relation. We say that the fields that govern the author are the author ID, and it references the ID from the user, and then we define author ID below it. This is a many to one relationship, and this is how Prisma handles its relations. Let us take a closer look at the query builder, and you can see that it is pretty straightforward to understand what it does. You have the Prisma client directly that we have imported from the lib file that we created, and we access the particular entity, and we create and we provide the data for it. You can see that creation of data with joins is also very intuitive, where you can just mention the posts for when you create the user, and when you get user, all you need to do is run this. Now, to learn more about the migration utility, you can just go to the Prisma's documentation and go through this get start section, where they explain everything in a very simple way. And if you want to look at how you can define different schemas for your tables, you can look at the models section under the Prisma schema, and they mention all the different things that you can use to generate tables, different kinds of attributes, defining enums, composite types, so on. Finally, for the client and building queries itself, you can look at the Prisma client. Everything that you need will be over here for writing queries, and that's it. That is how you use Prisma inside a Next.js application. Thanks for watching.